everyone, it's Lexi, and today I will be sharing with you my top 5 books that I've read this winter. So I'm going to cover all the books that I read in December, January, and February, and then like the rating, and then I'm going to say my top 5 out of all of the ones that I read over these months. So without further ado, let's get started. So in December, I ended up reading The Lake House by Kate Morton, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. I then read Talking as Fast as I Can by Lauren Graham, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. I then read The Fate of the Tearling by Erika Johansen, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. I then read Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the illustrated edition, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. I then read Heartless by Marissa Meyer, which I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I read The Circle by, I forget the author's name, but I gave that a 2 out of 5 stars. I then read Scrappy Little Nobody by Kendrick, which I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So moving on to January, I then read Walk on Earth, a Stranger by Carson, which I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I then read It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, and I gave that a 4 out of 5 stars. I then read Breath of Scandal by Sandra Brown, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. And then moving on to February, I read Everything We Keep. I forget the author's name for this one, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. I then read The Case of Beasts for Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. I then read Agent Carter Season 2 Declassified, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. I then read A Fall of Marigolds by Susan Meissner, and I gave that a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I then read Like a River Glorious by Carson, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. And then lastly, I read The Health by Catherine Stockett, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. So this winter, I ended up reading quite a lot of good books and then quite a few that I did not like at all. So it was very hard to pick out my top 5, but I don't know, we'll see. There's so many good books, so all the ones that I gave good ratings, please check them out. They're really good, so let me just go ahead and get started. So the first book that I would be in my top 5 is The Lake House by Kate Morton, and what I really liked about this book was just the sense of mystery, and it was beautifully written. It follows the story of a girl who, like in the 1930s, whose brother, they host like a big like Midsummer's Eve party, and during that fireworks show, her brother of like 1 or 2 years old disappeared from his crib, never to be seen again. And and then it kind of follows the story of a girl who is a detective who present day, and she kind of stumbles upon this mystery, and she is very keen on figuring out like what happened to this kid. So it's really interesting because it goes back and forth between present day and the past, and I think it's really neat. It shows like the story, like it's also covers like the 1920s and like just like the love story between the parents and just the dynamics and all that. Like it was really good. I really like it, keeps you guessing, and I didn't guess who was gonna be like I didn't guess the ending at all. It was so good. It is very, you have to pay a lot of attention, and it's written basically in paragraphs. There's very little dialect, I will say, so it takes quite a while to get through, but it is so good. My mom's currently reading this right now, and she loves it, and my aunt also read it, and she liked it as well. So yeah, like it's really good. If you like a mystery that has like a historical element, then that's beautifully written, and like I can picture everything, then go check this book out. It was so good. Then the next one would have to be The Fate of the Tearling by Erika Johansen, and I know this book, I was reading the reviews on Goodreads after like I read it, and there was a lot of mixed feelings with how it ended, but this is the last book in the Queen of the Tearling trilogy, and I was super excited for it. I think this one was my favorite out of all of them. I know the ending was a little bittersweet, but I think it was necessary giving everything, and it was a little rushed, but I feel like it was necessary for everything to kind of happen. So like basically, I don't want to give too much away, but it follows a girl named Kelsey who lives in the Tearling, who's queen of the Tearling, but for the past like 18 years she's been living with this foster family out in the woods because someone killed her mother, and she for her safety, so she is like 19 and she's coming back to reclaim her throne. But they live in this regress society, like it's in the future, but it's a regress society, and there's a lot of political stuff going on, and just dynamics between like church and like the church and like the government and all that. It's a really good political fantasy, which I really like, with some magic elements thrown into it, but I was really excited. This book did get pushed back from its publication date. I think it was supposed to come out in the summer or early fall, and then got pushed back to November, like the end of November, but it was well worth the wait. I was super excited. It was so good. I liked how it kind of had like a more female friendship in here as well, but oh, it's so spooky, so good. I highly recommend it, and if you are like one of the feminists out there, like, this book is for you, or this series. Next would have to be Heartless by Marissa Meyer. I am not very familiar with Alice in Wonderland. Like, I remember seeing the cartoon maybe once when I was younger, but it wasn't like, my mom doesn't like Alice in Wonderland, so I didn't like watch it that often, so I wasn't familiar with the characters, and like, because I know I was listening to some reviews or reading them, and they talk about her, how she throws in things from Alice in Wonderland that I like kind of went over my head. Some of the stuff I did get, but basically this is a prequel to like how the Red Queen became evil, and I really liked it. Follows a girl named Catherine who really enjoys baking, and her parents don't really want her to pursue that. They want her to be like kind of marry the king, who kind of has his eye out for her, and that's not the life she wants to live. And it's interesting because like, she's so kind and thoughtful and creative, and you wonder, how does she become like the Red Queen that we all know, like off with her head, like type of thing. So yeah, like, I really liked it. I liked how she just described like the baking, because I love baking it and I could just picture everything, but it was neat to see. Like, it did have a little bit of insta love in it, but I really liked it. Marissa Meyer is really good at kind of fairy tale retellings. I like how she made this her own and just added her own little spin to it. So yeah. Next would be It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, and this follows a girl whose father just passed away, and she who was very abusive to her mother, and she, like, throughout the story it kind of reads like she talks about how her mother stayed with him even though he was abusive, and like that, I will never do that. And what's interesting is that she ends up falling in love with this guy, and she also ends up being in an abusive relationship with him. He's very abusive, and she's kind of going down the same path that her mother did, and that kind of, like, everything gets thrown into perspective when she kind of crossed paths with her boyfriend, her first boyfriend that she had, and he kind of throws everything into a bundle. And I really like this book because it kind of showed a different side to kind of domestic violence, and just like, because I feel like kind of the stigmatisms around this is like how can someone stay with someone who's abusive, or like, why will they do that? And I think it's important to show, like, being in an abusive relationship, it's not okay. If your partner hits you, like, that's not okay. And just kind of showing kind of like the psychology behind like why people will stay with their abuser. And I think it's important to show like how it kind of goes on a path, because I was reading the author note at the end, and the author's mother was in an abusive relationship, and she kind of stayed with the father, and just kind of this had like a personal connection to it. And I think it's important to show girls this, and boys as well too, because like it's a two-way street with domestic violence. And I think this was really good. This was my first book that I read from Colleen Hoover, and it was really good. And yeah, I think it has a really important message that it's relevant in our society, and it sheds a different light on domestic violence and just kind of like the psychology and the emotional kind of that it has with it. So yeah. And lastly, I have A Fall of Marigolds by Susan Meissner, and this was the first Tales and Teacups book pick of the month, and I had this book on my shelf for a while, and I decided to make it the first book club pick. And basically it has a dual storyline. It follows a girl named Clara in 1911, and she is a nurse on Ellis Island, and she was a survivor of this very tragic kind of factory fire, and she suffered a lot of guilt from that. And so she kind of sends herself to Ellis Island, and she like where is it in her, like she's in an in-between place. She hasn't left basically the whole time she's been there, and she's kind of afraid to like go back out into the world. She's suffering a lot of guilt from what happens. And then there also covers the story of Taryn, who it's in 2011, and she was a survivor from 9/11, and she is also going through a lot of guilt still because her husband was at the towers, and because she was supposed to meet with him there, and she like he would have survived if she didn't meet him there, and she was late, and then the plane hit and he passed away. So she's suffering a lot of guilt, and so it kind of goes back to Clara, and she kind of meets this man like at Ellis Island. She's a nurse, and he has this marigold scarf, and she's very fascinated with it. So she kind of like it takes off from there, and I really was surprised about this book. I did find the historical element intriguing, but I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. I thought it kind of shows you kind of like how people can be stuck in this in-between place, and where like the rest of the world is going like forward and moving on with their lives and just kind of living. They're stuck in this in-between place where like they just exist, like they can't go back and they can't move on with their lives. And I think especially like although it deals with tragedies both within their time, like I feel like this is relatable to anyone who's lost a loved one and just kind of being so consumed in their grief that they don't want to move on with their life. And I think that has a really important message in it. So if you are looking for something that's like a tearjerker that has historical like element to it, then I highly recommend you pick this book up. It was so good. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know in the comments below what some of your favorite books were that you read this season and what you think about some of these. So yeah, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.